Willpower was a myth, an illusion, a cheap trick for the idiots who thought there was only one way to skin a cat, only one way to get thin. It sounds so dumb in today's world, but there were no forums, no Google to tell you that bulimia was a nightmare sinkhole you didn't want to go near. This was the 90s. We didn't have spoilers or fucking trigger warnings or moral quandaries about that stuff. This is what the supermodels do. Time for the party trick. It was like a children's game to us. That's the tragic thing. We were just kids out playing in the woods, and I don't blame Kaylee in that pre-internet, pre-information age for sharing her burden and making it mine. So hello, you wonderful citizen of the internet, and welcome to something a little bit different. For 2 years or so now, I've been telling you my own story bit by bit, from first love to first drug, youthful naivety to chemical chaos, and that story's out now as a book. If you're interested, just search up Amazon for Millennium Gothic, author Dorian Bridges, or you can try out the new one, which is called Exit Note and only came out a couple of months ago, and you guys seem to be really liking it, which means the world, because I was terrified to put that book out for so many reasons. And so I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you, any of you who've ever picked up and read any of my books. Like, it just means the whole wide world, so thank you, seriously. But today, since you keep asking me for more stories, it's time for someone else to take the reins. Someone else's messy, disordered life, and I do need to give you an ED and SA trigger warning before we get started, before you get too sucked in and involved. So if those subjects are too difficult, too sticky, too poisonous for you right now, please turn away. I've got a horde of other babblings on other subjects. This channel is a mad, clambering, rebellious vine of chaos, so follow a different branch for now if you're not ready. But for those of you who are, we're going to call our new friend Dana. As to whether she's real, whether her story is true, well, she certainly walked this earth under a different name, and I did love her to bits for over a decade. But I've taken pieces from other people too, pieces of several ED-related anecdotes and stories from the people I knew that just stuck with me for a multitude of reasons. Then I pieced and patched together the holes in those stories with a webbing of imagination, instinct, likelihood, and a fair amount of deliberately misleading fiction. Because as I've mentioned with Millennium Gothic, which was my first real world, true world writing project, I clearly put too much naive autistic truth in that book. And I do not want the potential hunting down of people to occur ever again. So from now on, these things will have their roots deep in truth, but the leaves, the flowers, the bits you see, the story you harvest and take away, there will be a lot more fiction there just to keep the people I love and loved safe. But anyway, Dana is not wholly one person. She's an amalgamation of several dysfunctional souls I've loved, known, and way too often lost, but whose stories always stuck with me for their poignancy or their twisted irony, as with this one. And this first story about Dana, it belongs in the main to one very specific, utterly unforgettable girl. Again, mixed up with bits of fiction, bits of other people, all of this. But the bits and pieces of her life story that landed in my hands were starkly, darkly fascinating, and she had heart. She had this huge personality that her ED never managed to take away from her, which was miraculous but dangerous, because you don't see it coming. You don't see that you're going to lose someone when their personality seems big enough and fierce enough and unsinkable enough that you just think they're indestructible. Honestly, I'm convinced that had she lived, you wouldn't be watching my channel, you'd be watching hers instead. Like, she loved making a tit of herself in front of the camera. She loved all of that stuff, and I'm convinced that had she lived, she would be on YouTube by now, and her channel would be hilarious. It would be brilliant. She was a riot, and so loving, so sparky, so unpredictable, yet with visible wells of pain that she would so rarely let you see. And this Dana telling her story, mixed up with the stories of other beautiful souls lost too soon, I think I just wanted to understand them to feel closer to them again, in putting myself in their shoes, then walking from A to B to C. Because girls like Dana, girls like my friends who lost their lives, they don't get talked about in the media. No awareness is ever raised, no candlelit vigils get held because it's too uncomfortable. See? It's not on brand. Positivity, growth, change, we do recover. You know, all that cheesy shit you get force-fed in ED movies. Everyone, like, I get it, everyone wants a happy ending, right? This neat little tale with a neat little ending that makes you feel good when you walk out the movie theatre, but the fact is, EDs aren't neat, and giving them these artificial happy endings or making it look like no one over the age of 25 is still suffering, it's so toxic, short-sighted and dangerous. It leaves you believing that maybe you can dabble in an ED just to lose a few pounds, or to get the attention of a parent who doesn't understand you, or whatever desperate teenage delusion you may have. Making an ED sound like a brief little affair with the devil from which you can always return safe and sound with a single course of therapy, or one little hospital stay with a click of your ruby slippers perhaps. Then it's over, and for the rest of your life you'll be an inspiration to the world, a recovery inspiration. This view of EDs is not just absolute baloney, it's dangerous as all hell. EDs aren't brief, delicate flowers, they're evil weeds, and the moment one begins to seed in your mind, you need to seek help immediately. None of that, I'm not sick enough, I'm not worthy of help, I just need to lose a bit more weight, and then maybe I'll put it down. Like, no. Because it's a delusion, this thought that you can control it, that it's just a bit of a snappy pet, but you've got it on a leash. Like, no. Don't go there. Some people need to see just how deep the roots of the ED weed really go, that it will wrap its vines into your soul so inextricably you won't know who you are without it, and potentially you will still be suffering and stuck in life, and nothing will have changed for you even in your 30s. You know, most of the inspirations for Dana passed away in their 30s, and I knew them from when we were in our mid to late teens. And all of us, you know, we thought it was one of two things. We thought, oh, we'll either get better and have this perfect life, or we'll just die. No one sees the middle ground. That, no, you can just stay sick. You can just stay sick for decades. And you will lose everything, your health, your friends, your family, your job, any form of financial freedom, all of it, and it will go on and on and on, and then eventually it will take your life too. And that is the story that never gets told, because it's not on brand, and it's not cute, and it's not, you know, you can't wrap it up in a little bow and make it look like a positive success story. And for some reason all the media seems to want to tell are positive success stories with EDs. Imagine that, right? Being told you're not on brand for the mental illness you suffered then died from. The main inspiration for Dana, she had such a huge heart, like I said, and she was such a cheerleader for those she loved. Another story that will weave through Dana's belongs to the most generous girl I've ever met, who is a fairly recent loss, and who was so open and so sweet until the world broke her mind into torturous mirror fragments that ultimately took her life. I do want to weave her story through it too, because she plays on my mind quite a bit. All of them within the world of Dana's story, they deserve to be more than a fading, failed memory or a small body under a tombstone. No grave can hold my body down. I hope I can do you justice, ladies. I hope your stories might help someone, even if it's just to feel seen and understood and not alone. Even if it's just me feeling closer to you again. Anyway, whatever. It's time to give Dana her moment. There's no big budget here, for which I'm sorry. It's a heat wave. My computer's making a racket. My camera is just my phone right now, which I'm really sure you can tell. And nothing looks slick and shiny and cool, but I'll tell you what it does look like, all of this. It looks exactly, plus or minus a lick of paint and some different hair dye, it looks exactly the way it did when I used to talk to Dana over the camera right here in this spot, just like this, just us. And maybe that makes my shoddy setup easier to swallow or more poignant somehow. Maybe it fucking doesn't. And with that preamble rambled, I think it's time to let Dana herself take the reins and tell you her own damn story. Trigger warning once again for ED content and some SA mentions. This chapter, I'm calling it Fat Camp. And from here on out, I will hand the mic to Dana. My mother's erupting at me again as she drives me home from the very last family Thanksgiving I ever wished to attend. At the end of a frazzled day of fake smiles and oversized pumpkin pies, too much baking for my mom and too much puking for me. And now she's coming at me with all the classics that you've probably heard 1,000 times from your own mother or father, if you're a walking disaster like me. Where did I go so damn wrong with you, Dana? What did I do so wrong? And it's exhausting, as ever, trying to guard your mother's feelings and your own all at the same time, when they're at such total odds with each other. Jagged crystal shards fill my mouth, all the words I want to say or possibly scream. Mom, you did nothing wrong. Mom, you know full well what you did wrong. I know you love me. I know you tried. Why couldn't you love me enough when it actually mattered? And so much more. Ugh. I'm staring out at the dreary sepia-lit night, watching the streetlights swoosh by, wishing I could teleport myself right out of the car. I know full well she doesn't even want an answer, a critique of her parenting skills. She never does, and frankly, I don't even want to give her one. 'Cause what the fuck are you meant to do or say when you've already dragged the brutal, horrifying cadaver of the truth out from the depths of your traumatized teenage brain? Then had your own mom believe his words over yours. 2 decades later, and she still believes him, not me. So I ask you, literally, what the fuck are you meant to do? She's my mom. She's the only person I'll ever have in this world who'll be that for me. And when you're severely mentally ill and the government are holding back your disability checks like psychopathic murderous bastards, till you have to do some unspeakable stuff for money, stuff that would make you crazy even if you weren't there already, you need your mom. And not solely for the practical, financial, stay here if you wind up homeless mom shit. It's so much deeper than that, isn't it always with mothers and daughters? You're going to die, Dana, she continues shrieking. No mother should ever have to bury her child. Will you please consider going inpatient again, just for It doesn't work for me, I interrupt. You know that. And I like my therapist. She's great. I'm not switching again to some random new person, let alone being put on one-to-one where Mom, they literally watch you pooping. The whole thing's so goddamn messed up and it only makes me worse. Look, please just drop me off at the corner. I need groceries. I'll walk from here. You're going to keel over and die. You should be in a hospital, not walking anywhere. I just roll my eyes at her. Moments later, defeated, she stops the car. It didn't always used to be so easy to cut off a conversation like that with my mom, but after 2 decades of the same cyclic shit, there really isn't anything left to say. I love you, Mum, honestly, more than the moon. I will always love you too, she says in that flat, hollow mum voice that sounds so utterly emotionless, but that you can feel somehow holds back a barrage of emotions that I, as a child-free woman, can never truly understand. She's just staring fixedly out the windshield as she adds a pleading, but won't you at least think about going inpatient for me? With every drop of sincerity I can muster, I tell her, I'll think about it, Mum. Then I flip the smile right off and conclude, I'll think about it the very same day you kick him out of our house and out of our lives, permanently. I watch as the tears in her eyes turn to fury, exasperation, and the usual batting back of, Dana, it is not healthy to hold onto this stuff for all eternity. Bill made a mistake, that's all. You know he was never himself when he drank, and he doesn't drink anymore. He's apologised 1,000 times to you and to Jesus and to me. He's a changed man, and I don't see why you can't accept him as a part of our family. After all the hard work he's... Seriously, Mum? All that hard work putting down the bottle and learning that violating minors is actually... Oh, for goodness sake, Dana, don't be so fucking vile. Billy's not like that, and I will not have you spouting these awful damaging allegations about... My fury physically ejects me from the car. I slam its door shut with as much force as I can muster. Between my malnourished body and the gigantic, stupidly expensive SUV Bill bought for her a year ago, it doesn't even slam. It just clunks luxuriously closed. I was 12, Mum, I state, leaning on the glass. But that doesn't matter to you, does it? Doesn't matter. No one's paying for it now in your happy little world. Just me. Just me, like always. I back away from the car. Mum's shaking her head at me, lips pursed, though I can see the pain in her eyes. If you locked us in a room together, this argument would go round and round in circles till we ripped each other's heads right off, and it still wouldn't accomplish anything. The worst thing is, what am I even meant to ask from her now? Bill's, much as I hate to admit it, not that awful to her now he's sober. And thank God there are no young girls in our immediate family to protect from him. Mom's life really is a happy one. Do I actually want her to spend her retirement years alone, just as broke as me, then die alone to boot? All for something that happened over 20 years ago and that I apparently am the only person on earth with a living memory of. Do I really matter enough for that? You don't matter, mutters the Eeyore in my brain. Even your own mother doesn't think so. What else is there to say? You know it'd be better for all of them if you weren't around. All you are is one walking fucking reminder of the family closet skeleton. You even look like the family closet skeleton. Sole purpose in life, haunting the living with truths they'll never even believe. Why on earth do you keep breathing? Scowling, I step into the chilled air of the 7-Eleven. By the time I get home with my sack full of Mountain Dew and a family-sized cheesecake, my heart's doing that lurchy staccato dance I long ceased worrying about. After all, why would I worry? There's only two possible outcomes. Number one, it's nothing. My body's just being dramatic again, which has been the case for way too many disappointingly death-free years. To the point I'm honestly starting to believe I'm immortal and that no matter what I do to myself, I'll be stuck on this earth till I'm 90. Scenario number two, though. I am about to have a fatal heart attack. But that's not a worry either. Not really, not to me. I mean, it doesn't feel nice dying slowly, but when you've lived most of your life half hoping every day that it might be your last... You have to come to terms with the end sensations, the hunger, the cold, the pain in the depths of your bones as your body gnaws desperately away at its own marrows, and of course the heart palpitations. I've dedicated myself to this craft, leaning into those feelings, burning out my sanity with self-hatred until up is down and starvation feels almost holy. I'm just showing my body who wears the pants in this relationship, showing myself how strong I am, that I'm in control of this fucking meat suit, no one else. Especially not him. I greet my tabby cat Cookie in the kitchen, and as I stand back up, my heart starts lurching again. Everything goes black for a good 15 seconds. Any sensible person would sit on the floor, but I just stand there blind and wobbling, hoping it's the end. As usual it isn't, but my heart stops in my chest like a lead weight, like dead meat, for long enough that it mildly freaks even me out. When my vision returns, I look at Cookie, and Cookie runs directly out of the room like his tail's on fire. I've never seen him do anything like that before. Does my chill-as-anything lapcat suddenly sense something about me that he doesn't like? And is it the something that I suspect? They say animals can smell it, sense it long before we do. Death, I mean. Maybe it really is my time. And if it is, then I guess I might as well waste my final breaths telling you my gloomy fucking story. But not like this, from here, where it's all such a fucked up mess, no one even knows what to say to me anymore. I need to start back then, all those years ago, when I was just a kid, at the place where this life really started, or perhaps ended. I've already told you the real kicker, right? him, I mean. And how fucking cliche is that? I swear to God, you go into ED treatment, everyone there is either a ballet dancer, a gymnast, a horse rider, or a modelling kid. And if they're not one of those, there's a decent gambling shot that it's sexual abuse that's got them so twisted up inside. It's horrendous. Most of our abusers aren't locked up, but we sure as hell are. In sterile, controlling, morgue-like hospitals, in bodies we want to rip right out of, we're barred up behind our own prominent rib cages. I sometimes wonder if it's only me who wants to starve themselves right out of the whole meat sack, like, maybe if I lose enough weight, I'll just float away from all this pain. And it's a shit feeling, being so cookie-cutter predictable. None of us have original stories, in truth. We all think we do, that our past is so tragic and unique and rare, but honestly, get a bunch of us together on a ward and you rapidly realise you've never had an original ED thought in your life. What he did was, I guess, the beginning of it all, and I'm not giving you the sordid little details because you're not my fucking therapist. The only detail that matters here, I think, is that, rightly or wrongly, I blame Fat. I blame Fat for all of it. And why wouldn't I? Blaming him is clearly pointless. He claims not to remember. Oh, it was the liquor what did it. And my own mom stands by him, not me. So I have to blame something, don't I? I have to take it out on something, and that something is Fat. I had always been the fat kid in school, which is an experience I don't recommend to anyone, but especially not in the Kate Moss 90s. And by the time I was in middle school, life became this relentless bullying hell from the skinny mean girls, from the sleazy boys, from fucking everyone. We didn't have words like body shaming or fat phobia back in the 90s, let alone fat acceptance and body positivity. Are you kidding? If you were fat, you were the laughingstock of every sitcom, every magazine, and every face around you, and it was 100% socially sanctioned, no voices in opposition. I guess I was also a dumb kid, because the only way I could cope with it was to bury myself in even more food. It was like an addiction for me, like the only friend I had. So I packed on even more weight, and like life wasn't crappy enough, I hit puberty when I was 11. The very second those unexpected, unwanted curves swelled on the equally unwanted fat that coated my body, he started looking at me in a way he never had before. And when I was 12, well, all that stuff happened. It was only a handful of times, and he'd always buy me stuff the next day, all guilty and shameful with his hush money. He'd be so sweet to my mum afterwards too. She really would be happier than I'd ever seen her, and that twisted my head like nothing else. We'd all go to Disney World like the perfect family until his guilt was my guilt. Guilt that I was the only one not smiling, the only one bringing down the vibe. I hated myself. I hated the fat. I couldn't even blame him for treating me like the garbage I felt I was. Everyone at school treated me that way. It was clearly just my place in the world. Thin girls got attention from all the hot boys at school, the ones you wanted to be seen by. Fat girls got stared at by creepy old men, but no matter how much the fires of my self-loathing burned, food was still my comfort blanket. I couldn't diet to save my life. Ironically, it was while I was stuffing Twinkies into my face that everything changed. I saw this advert on TV for a fat camp just upstate. Everyone telling their transformation stories looked so happy, so free, so empowered, and so thin above all. And with a jolt of amazement, I realised that even if fat camp didn't work on me, it'd still be a straight month away from him. I was doing everything I could to avoid him on school days, but the summer break was looming, and every time I thought about it, it was like this cold knife twisting in the pit of my stomach. So the next time he did what he did, then came at me with the hush money, I asked if he'd pay for me to do fat camp. Honestly, I reckon the sad old fuck was getting genuinely guilty by then, as if he were even capable of it. because he seemed just as happy to have me out of the house as I was to be gone. 5 weeks later, Mom and Bill drove me up to Five Oaks Fitness Retreat. It was to be a life-changing stay, albeit in the most ironic of ways. The first thing that hits you at fat camp, once you've put all your stuff away in the pokey, musty-smelling bunkhouses and been shown round the grounds by some nauseatingly perky volunteer, well, it should be obvious. You look around and everyone, besides the staff, is fat. A lot of them were fatter than me. I was actually one of the smaller girls, and that was new as all hell to me. I mean, I didn't love my time at Five Oaks, fucking hated most of it actually. The hikes particularly were a fat girl's nightmare. 20 puffing, wheezing, sweating kids being marched all around these endless woods with the mosquitoes eating us alive. Then all the learning about calories and how to diet was just pointless, given I already knew it all. My problem wasn't that I was a dunce, I just didn't have the willpower to stick to eating healthy. Food was my only comfort. My life was a sewer, from the hell at school to the creepy, creeping hands of Bill. I had no idea how I was meant to get through a single day without comfort eating. But I wasn't the only one who felt that way. Not here, not anymore. I wasn't the only kid with a shitty life now, was I? People forget that, seriously, about fat kids. Back in the 90s especially, everyone thought we were just spoiled brats like Eric Cartman on South Park. And we weren't, generally. We were just damaged. We had food addictions, and just like all addicts, it was born from trauma. All that stuff rapidly became our main topic of conversation in those musty little bunkhouses at night, mosquitoes flitting their shadows around the little porch lights outside. It was all about how much we hated ourselves, how much our lives sucked, who'd been on what miserable fucking diet, how they'd spectacularly failed, and who'd done the most extreme, crazy shit in the pursuit of a different life. And that was when it happened. The moment everything changed forever. It was while we bitched and moaned over these tiny little pots of sugar-free raspberry jello. That was when I first met Kaye. It's amazing to think there was ever a world where I hadn't met Kaye, honestly. She was like the iceberg that hit the Titanic. You can't imagine that ship without it, can you? But back then, glimpsed from a distance, Kaye was just this blonde girl, 14 to my 12 and a half, and she was a total rebel. She'd have her signature smudged eyeliner on, even when we were out on those puffing, sweat-dripping hell hikes, and she smoked behind the bunkhouse whenever she thought she could get away with it. As we got closer, it became clear she was an encyclopedia on all the ways to lose weight that they didn't teach you here. Turned out there were shiny secrets even in the dull, dull world of dieting. But what made Kaye truly compelling was that her method was working. She was about my size, maybe a little bigger, but she showed me this picture that she carried around everywhere of her just a year previous, and the girl in that worn, scrunkled photograph was unrecognisable. In another few months at this rate, Kaye wouldn't be fat at all. And I was desperate, fucking desperate to know how she was doing it. I chased her around like this little lost puppy for days, like I was hoping her magic, her willpower, might just drop off and land on me like fairy dust. By the end of the second week, we'd actually gotten pretty close. And then, at last, she let me in on the most dazzling secret my 12-year-old soul had ever heard. Willpower was a myth, an illusion, a cheap trick for the idiots who thought there was only one way to skin a cat, only one way to get thin. There was another way, an eat all you like and have the pounds melt off like butter way. I guess you know exactly what I'm talking about if you're here watching this and you're older than the 12 and a half I was back then, because it sounds so dumb in today's world, especially with half my teeth being caps or veneers due to that glamorous diet taking far, far from me than just a bit of fat. But things were so horribly different in the 90s, out in the nowhere land of Five Oaks Fat Camp. There wasn't even an internet back then, not really, and we were such naive kids. There were no forums, no Google to tell you that bulimia was a nightmare sinkhole you didn't want to go near. Back then you just stumbled through life completely alone, making the best of whatever and whoever fate blew into your path. Kaye had learned her bath diet, as she grinningly dubbed it, from an older girl at her school. It had actually been a bit of a trend there, and she'd been at it ever since. She told me everything, as we sat in the long weeds behind our bunkhouse a few days later, shielded from view by 2 massive oaks, their branches whispering in the summer wind above our heads. That day is imprinted in my mind's eye forever. The sunlight came down in these little dappled freckles on Kaylee's blonde hair, the warm air scented with this odd clash of fresh wild grass and the polluted stink of her cigarette. When it was smoked right down to the filter, she stubbed it out in the lush green grass, then pushed it down into the tangle of greenery and invisible sin. This was to be the day I'd finally persuaded her to show me, what her magic method entailed. My heart was already sputtering with nerves and excitement all stirred together like cookie dough. I could feel this static charge of mischief and secrecy that crackled between us, and it was such a new feeling for me. Was this what friendship actually felt like? Or was I simply standing at the glittering gates that separated my old fat life from my new fantastic thin one? Kaye was about to give me everything I wanted in the entire world. I was so convinced this was the end of everything bad for me. But the thing is, she'd also told me some girls couldn't do it, couldn't make themselves bath, no matter how hard they tried. And what if I was one of them? What if, by some utter curse of shit physical luck, my body couldn't eject calories the way Kaylee's did? But the uncertainty, the peril, it kind of made that moment all the more electric. Maybe on some weird subconscious level, I knew I was tiptoeing on the knife edge that was about to slice my world in two. Or maybe I was just a fat kid on vacation with the first fat friend I'd ever had, sharing the only moment of genuine companionship I'd experienced in my sad little life. Maybe that's all it was, the electric charge in the blue summer air of Five Oaks Fat Camp. "Wait here," Kaye whispered at me, then she was off into the cabin, her wide-legged 90s jeans swooshing together with every step. I sat in the grass, combing my fingers through its cool tangle, listening to the early evening birdsong, imagining myself going back to school after summer break, thin. The looks on people's faces, the way all those foul words they threw at me would be rendered useless, flipped on their heads, shoved back down their throats, transformed into awe and compliments. The summer air smelled like possibilities, like dreams unfurling. And then it smelled like the fruity chemical blast of Kaylee's Charlie Red perfume as she returned from the cabin drenched in the stuff, trying to drown out the stale smoke of her last cigarette. "Come on," she hissed at me, and I was off into the woods, following the sunlight dappling her blonde hair, the sound of her jeans swooshing through the greenery. She was holding 2 packs of Reese's Cups and 2 bottles of Diet Coke, and how in hell's name she'd smuggled in the former was anyone's guess, but somehow it barely even surprised me. Kaye was pure magic, she just was. I'd been taught that fat people, fat girls especially, were the butt of everyone's joke, the antithesis of cool, but Kaye, nah, she broke the mould. And in another few months, she'd be genuinely skinny, wouldn't she? At that point, she'd be fucking unstoppable, I reckoned. And if I could just learn her secret, would I be too? As we rounded the trunk of a particularly massive tree, Kaye stopped so abruptly I nearly crashed into her back, so lost in the swirl of dreams and possibilities, this new life that suddenly felt close enough to taste. "No one will hear us out here," Kaye said, staring up at the wide spread of the trees above our heads. Or you, I mean. Everyone's loud to start with. Doing it quietly takes practice. I nodded, glanced instinctively over my shoulder. We were almost entirely shielded by the forest here. All I could hear was the birds, the wind in the trees, the faintest babble of some country music radio station at the camp. I started gnawing my lip as I remembered the last time I'd gotten sick, 2 Christmases ago, after eating most of my mum's gingerbread house. It had been unbelievably gross, but anything was worth it to be skinny, wasn't it? "Here," said Kaye, holding out a Diet Coke and a packet of Reese's Cups. "Drink this first." I downed the sweet brown fizz of the Coke, and Kaye imparted secret after secret. That you didn't just eat, then stick your fingers down your throat. There was a knack to all of it. The consumption, the regurgitation, it was a skill like anything else. And there was so much to learn. She told me, well, a lot. Things I will not repeat here. That moment, that evening, therapists have dragged me back there so many times it's preserved like crystal inside my mind. They all want me to hate her, those therapists, resent her, blame her, and honestly, sometimes I do. But mostly, I just see two fucked up kids finally finding acceptance in each other after so many years excluded, singled out, made to feel like shit, just for how they looked. And at the time, I genuinely believed that Kaye held the key to the door of salvation. Every word she imparted, it was sacred scripture to me. I would lie awake half that night, staring into the blackness, listening to 5 lightly snoring girls, committing it all to the banks of my memory forever. Kaye was like my own personal fairy godmother, but I hope you'll understand, won't you? Why I'm not going to pass the baton, repeat those words, those tips, become your own personal Kaye, then watch you follow me down, down, down. When most of the Coke was gone, she told me I could eat the candy. It tasted like peanut butter heaven after those 2 weeks of fat camp rabbit food, but mostly it tasted like freedom. This is calorie-free candy, Kaye was saying, wide-eyed with awe at the magic of this secret she was imparting through a sticky mouthful of Reese's Cup. This is what the supermodels do. Eat, bath, smoke and Coke. That's the model diet. I haven't found a Coke pusher yet, but who even needs one when you've got this? Hey, stop there. Leave a little bit of soda to rinse your mouth out with. It's easier in a bathroom, but like I said, you're going to be loud when you start. We can't risk it. I nodded reflexively, washing down the last bite, then screwing the cap back on before a mosquito could drown itself in my Coke. Right, she said, and she was tying back her hair. Time for the party trick. And that was where she taught me, in the midst of all that nature and purity, to do one of the most unnatural things a human can possibly do. That was the word that kept spinning round my head while we did it, actually. Unnatural. It really gave me the creeps when she got me to do this shape with my right hand, then just stuff it down my throat. I can't even explain what it feels like. Everything back there is so hot and slippery slick with saliva, and there's so much biology. All these horrible flappy pink bits. Unnatural. Alien. No one should ever know how it feels to stroke their own tonsils. Fact. And it didn't even work at first. I just kept cough heaving so hard it hurt, and Kaye would hiss at me to keep it down, to... Well, there was a bunch of practical advice I'm not even repeating. Eventually things got so freaking gross I wigged out completely, told her no way, I can't do this. There was saliva and snot all over my hand, dripping down my face, my eyes running. But Kaye just laughed, insisting, "You're so nearly there. Seriously, it's over in seconds. This is your first time, that's all. Go on. One more go. I double dare you." It was like a children's game to us. That's the tragic thing. We were just kids out playing in the woods, and I don't blame Kaye back then, in that pre-internet, pre-information age, for sharing her burden and making it mine. How was she to know that this teenage fad her school friends had battered around would become, for me, an addiction that would consume my entire life? She didn't have a fucking crystal ball, did she? She couldn't see me, still doing this, completely alone, in a million bathrooms across the states, my teeth crumbling out my mouth, with the constant barrage of stomach acid, even when I was well into my 30s. And me? Well, I was 12, and my life was rotten. Nothing could make it worse to my mind. Anything was worth trying once. So I took her up on her dare. I shoved my slimy, slippery fingers back down the hot, wet alien abyss of my throat, bent over, and Kaye was right. One more shove, and this lumpy fountain of effervescent cola and peanut butter cups came whooshing out onto the grass in front of me. I watched it fizzing poisonously down into the leaves, and I was shaking all over, but somehow Kaylee's victoriousness was still contagious. She pulled out a big wad of toilet tissue from her pocket, passed it over, and I blew the chocolate and cola snot out my nose, wiped my hands dry of slime and stomach acid, then rinsed my mouth till all I could taste was Diet Coke with this faint rancid aftertaste. Then Kaye bent over, shoved her fingers down her throat, and silently, neatly ejected everything she'd eaten that evening. Really was like a magic trick, the way she did it. And that was how it all began. As we walked back towards the cabins, I actually felt good, like lightheaded, but buzzing with adrenaline. I still wanted to know more. I needed to know everything. How long it took her to get that good, how to be less noisy, less covered in snot and spit and mucus. And like I said, this was the 90s. We didn't have spoilers or fucking trigger warnings. Kaye was an open book. I didn't realise it then, but I can guess it well enough now. She'd been alone with this secret for months, hadn't she? Even though she'd learned it from the older girls at school, not that many kids stick with the gruesome task of bulimia for long. Because it's not just a matter of knowing how to do it or collecting tips. It's a matter of hating yourself hard enough to put yourself through that over and over and over again. So I know now. Kaye must have been alone, barfing away in bathrooms at home, bathrooms at school, bathrooms at camp, all alone with her shameful secret. Until along came me, this naive, wide-eyed 12-year-old who thought Kaye was some kind of diet goddess. And she'd never had that in her life before, had she? Idol worship, I mean, like that? Back home she was just like me, the fat girl, the butt of every joke. And here, now, in my eyes, she was a fucking icon. I hung on her every word. And we clicked together like two codependent magnets. After that, we were thick as thieves the rest of our stay at camp. We didn't purge every day, particularly not once Kaylee's candy stash was exhausted and there was nothing worth binging on anyway. But those moments of shared barfing in the woods, I'll never ever forget them. They come back to me even now when I'm hunched over in some grimy gas station bathroom. Those woods felt so free, so vast, so pure, like nothing bad could ever come out of them. Our little sessions there, they bonded us together like nothing on earth. When it was time to leave camp, I genuinely felt like I'd lost a limb. All our in-jokes, all that camaraderie, the warm feeling of an actual friend, a secret shared, leaving it behind was like a fucking bereavement. We exchanged addresses, promised to write each other as often as we could. That was the best things got back then, wasn't it? No mobile phones, remember? Popular girls, of course, had a phone in their room, but I didn't. Kaye didn't. Why would we when we had no friends to chat to on the thing? So I still remember staring out the dusty back window of our lumbering Volvo, watching Kaylee's waving figure shrink away behind me. I really thought we'd be friends for life, that we'd meet up next summer the way we'd planned to. Not at a fat camp, because we weren't going to be fat anymore. That's the pact we made. It'd be a regular summer camp, and no one there would ever even know that we'd been fat. That was the plan, the pact. But it never reached fruition. Kaylee's family moved states not long after, and her letters got fewer and fewer. It sounded like she'd found actual friends at her new school, and I couldn't really resent her for that much. I mean, they were the druggy crowd, she said, but still, they were friends, real ones, flesh and blood, not the distant tear-stained pages that were all I could give her. I never knew which way it went when those letters finally stopped coming. Did she wind up addicted to the coke she always wanted to try, ODing in her quest for thinness, or... I know this is completely gross of me, but it's a vision even more painful. did she realise that the whole thing we shared was twisted, stupid, and frankly immature? Now she had real friendships based on something other than mutual self-loathing. Is that why she stopped writing? Why she ditched me? I'll never know. But that's where it all began. So will I tell you the rest? Fuck knows. Reflecting on all this is honestly a bit tedious at this point. I've been in therapy most of my life, stirring up the past. I don't entirely feel like doing it for a camera too. But equally, the end sensations get louder and louder. Maybe I do want to leave something behind. Maybe I do want to tell you how it's been, this life I think I'm leaving. So, will I see you again? Or will I disappear silently and forever, just like Kaye? You'll have to wait and see. And that, I guess, is the end of the first chapter. Will there be more? I hope so. I have started writing more. I do suspect it will be a little more sporadic than Millennium Gothic / The Nostalgia Project was, because obviously trying to weave together other people's stories, trying to think, you know, how would they have been when they were younger and how would they have reacted in this situation? Because even when people have told you about stuff, they don't tell you in like story time detail, you know, so you have to flesh out a lot, and there's a lot of second guessing yourself and doubting yourself and thinking, you know, am I handling this person's stories and their memory with care? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it justice? You know, as I said in the beginning, I do think there need to be more stories, which obviously, you know, someone else has to tell. Someone else has to tell the stories of the people who are not there anymore. But those stories need telling, because there is so much sugarcoating of ED stuff. Oh, an amazing thing happened the other day. I got a Facebook message from the girl who used to be Rebecca Garfoot, which, if you saw my video about how my ED began, it began because I saw this article in Sugar magazine about a girl called Rebecca Garfoot, and it was so badly written, man. They made her story sound so sugary and so perfect, and like you became ED'd and you got all this attention, you got everything you needed in the world, and everyone was lovely to you, and all your problems would be fixed because you go to a therapist and they'd fix you, and blah 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 blah. And I, as an autistic kid, I took this very literally, and I thought, right, this is the way to solve my life. I need to become anorexic and it will solve my life. And so I did, and it did not. And I'd not, you know, when I made that video, I hadn't really thought about the fact that, you know, Rebecca Garfoot, roughly being round about my age, turns out she's only 1 year older than me. I never thought, wow, she's maybe still around, maybe still kind of struggling with this stuff. And yeah, she messaged me on Facebook. And, you know, and I felt so bad because she felt so bad, because she felt that, you know, in telling her story, she'd kind of done harm to me. And it's like, it wasn't you, it was the journalist. It was the journalist who warped your story, because it turns out she does still struggle with her ED, even now, you know, at my age, a year older than me. And they in the Sugar magazine thing, they made it sound like it was a closed chapter. It was all over, you know, everything was fine with her and everything was rosy and all of this. And that was the toxic bit to me. But yeah, it was absolutely amazing to have. Actually, I still owe her a message. But it was mind blowing to me to finally go, oh my God, I'm actually talking to this girl. You know, she'd been such a figurehead to me in my mind in my teenage years, and then, you know, to have a chat when we're 39 and 40 and to talk about the adult realities of being mentally ill and it dragging on and on and on, and versus, you know, who we were as it was very surreal, very amazing moment. But yeah, this is why I'm so passionate about, I think, trying to tell ED stories that are not neat and that don't have a tidy ending or a happy ending, because I've seen and I've experienced firsthand how poisonous it can be when writers, journalists, whatever, sugarcoat EDs and make it sound like there's a happy ending for everyone. But this is a waffle. I guess I'm going to shut up and go away. But yes, there will be more of these stories coming up, I really hope. So I will see you soon. I will leave the Storytimes playlist below. I will leave the ED videos playlist below, but please, if this is getting triggery or tangly inside your brain, please go do something else instead. Just debrief, whatever distracts you and makes you feel balanced and happy and normal again. If you want to read any of my stories in writing, I will leave the details of my 3 books below as well. And I hope to see you again soon with more of Dana's story. Thank you for listening. Over and out. Hope you're doing okay. Bye bye.